What would you do if the only way to save your family was to sign your life away to a man who felt nothing, but owned everything? The pen trembled in Elena Ruiz's hand. Across the table, the billionaire watched her with the kind of stillness that made silence heavier than words. His name was Adrian Vale, cold, calculated, heir to a global empire built on acquisitions, not affections. They said he never smiled. They said he never lost. And now Elena realized they were both right. The contract in front of her wasn't a deal. It was a surrender. Outside, the city glittered under the winter rain glass towers, reflecting light like shards of ice. Inside, the room was warm, but the air felt thin. Elena could hear the clock ticking behind her, steady and cruel. 3 signatures, 1 promise, 0 escape. Adrian's voice was smooth, precise, almost mechanical. You understand the terms, he said. Once you sign, there's no going back. Elena nodded, even though she barely understood how her life had come to this point. Just days earlier, she'd been an art student struggling to pay rent, working nights at a gallery that smelled of turpentine and old wood. Her father's debts had caught up with them, debts owed to men who didn't knock twice. When Adrian Vale offered to resolve the situation, she thought he meant a loan. Instead, he offered a contract. Marriage, for 1 year. No affection, no interference, no questions. In exchange, every debt erased, every threat neutralized. It was business. Cold, clinical business. But the fine print felt like chains. Her pulse raced as she signed her name. A simple curve of ink that sealed her into a life she didn't understand. Adrian's eyes flicked down to the paper, then up to her face. Effective immediately, he said. You'll move into my estate tonight. And just like that, her world shifted. The Vale estate sat beyond the city limits, a mansion of glass and marble overlooking a forest blanketed in snow. It was silent there, too silent. Staff moved like ghosts, never meeting her eyes. Every surface gleamed. Every detail screamed perfection. And yet something about it felt empty, as if it had never been lived in, only maintained. Elena's room was spacious but cold, no personal touches, no warmth, just the faint scent of cedar and frost. She stood at the window watching the snowfall blur the edges of the world. She thought of her father, safe now because of her signature. She thought of Adrian, somewhere in the house, probably working in that steel and glass office she'd glimpsed when she arrived. The man didn't even say goodnight. Days turned into weeks. The contract dictated their lives down to the hour. Meals were scheduled, interactions timed. There were rules, so many rules. No entering his office uninvited. No public displays. No questions about his personal life, but rules couldn't silence curiosity. Elena noticed things. The way Adrian's jaw tightened whenever the word trust came up in conversation. The way he avoided certain rooms, especially the east wing. And the locked door at the end of the hall, its handle cold to the touch, its keyhole filled with dust. One night, unable to sleep, she wandered the halls. The mansion seemed alive, the creak of the floorboards, the whisper of the wind through unseen vents. She stopped outside that locked door again. There was a faint light flickering beneath it. Candlelight maybe, or a reflection from another room. Before she could lean closer, a voice cut through the darkness. Elena, she turned. Adrian stood at the end of the corridor, his silhouette framed by the dim light of a lamp, his eyes, gray and sharp as silver, fixed on her. I told you that wing is off limits. His tone wasn't angry, it was worse, disappointed, in a way that made her feel small. I couldn't sleep, she said quietly. I was just curious. His lips curved, barely. Curiosity has a cost. He stepped closer, his presence unsettlingly calm. For a heartbeat she thought he might actually be angry, but instead he only said, go back to bed. And she did. But not before noticing that, for the first time, his hands weren't steady. The next morning, the staff avoided her gaze even more than usual. The house felt heavier. She caught a glimpse of Adrian in the garden, standing alone in the snow without a coat. His face was unreadable, but the loneliness radiating from him was almost visible. Over time, she began to see cracks in his armor. Late nights in the library when he thought no one was watching, his gaze lingering on old photographs. The faint scar along his wrist that disappeared beneath his cuff. The way he sometimes whispered a name she didn't recognize, Clara. She wanted to ask, she didn't. The contract forbade it. But the walls between them began to thin. One evening a storm hit. The power went out, plunging the mansion into darkness. She found him in the study, lit only by the orange glow of the fireplace. For once he wasn't behind his desk. He was sitting on the floor, back against the wall, a glass of something dark in his hand. He looked up when she entered, his voice low. You shouldn't be here, neither should you, she said softly. But here we are. Something flickered behind his eyes, amusement, maybe. Or pain. She sat opposite him, the fire crackling between them. For the first time she noticed the tiredness in his posture, the weight in his silence. Why me? She asked. He took a slow sip before answering. Because you reminded me of someone I failed to save. The words hung in the air, fragile and heavy. Clara, she whispered before she could stop herself. His hand tightened around the glass until it cracked. A drop of blood slid down his palm. How do you know that name? I heard you say it, she admitted in the library. Silence, then a laugh, quiet, hollow. She was my wife. Elena's breath caught was. He stared into the fire. She died 3 years ago in this house. The firelight danced in his eyes, reflecting memories she couldn't see. She trusted me. I failed her. Since then, trust has been ... expensive. For a moment, the distance between them vanished. He wasn't the cold billionaire anymore. He was a man built of loss and guilt, and something in her shifted. From that night on, things changed. Subtly, quietly, he started joining her for breakfast, sometimes even asking about her art. He never smiled fully, but the corners of his mouth softened. One evening he asked to see her sketches. She hesitated, then showed him a portrait she'd been working on secretly. It was of him, not the businessman, but the man she'd seen by the fire-haunted human, broken. He studied it for a long time. Then, almost in a whisper, said, "No one's ever seen me like that. I just drew what's there," she replied. He looked at her as though she'd said something impossible. But just as the air between them began to warm, something or someone began trying to tear it apart. Strange letters started appearing under her door, unmarked envelopes with words written in black ink. "Leave while you can." One night, her phone rang an unknown number, a voice she didn't recognize. "He's lying to you," it said. "You don't know what he's hiding behind that locked door." Her heart raced. When she confronted Adrian, his expression turned cold again, that familiar wall snapping back into place. "Who's sending these?" she demanded. His answer was immediate. "You shouldn't concern yourself. Don't tell me what to be concerned about," she shouted. "You said you wanted trust, then start giving it." The room fell silent. His jaw clenched, but something regret flashed across his face. "There are things in this house you're not ready to know," and he walked away. That night, she dreamed of footsteps, of doors opening, of whispers calling her name. When she woke, the house was silent again, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her. The next morning, Adrian was gone. His staff claimed he'd flown out on business, but no one seemed to know where. The locked door at the end of the hall stood open. She hesitated, her pulse quickening. The air felt colder near that wing, thick with dust and forgotten air. She stepped inside. The room was dimly lit by the weak winter sun filtering through frosted glass. In the center stood an easel covered by a white cloth. She pulled it back slowly. A painting stared back at her. Her face, every detail perfect, every emotion captured the sadness, the strength, the quiet defiance. Signed at the bottom in careful strokes, Adrian Vale. She stepped back, heart pounding. He'd painted her not from photographs, not from memory, from observation, from nights when she hadn't known he was watching. And beside the easel, half hidden under a stack of papers, lay another document, a copy of the contract, but this one was different. The expiration date, the end of the one-year term, had been crossed out. Next to it, a single handwritten note. "Some promises aren't meant to end." Outside, thunder rolled across the horizon, and from somewhere deep in the house, a door creaked open. She turned toward the sound, her breath catching in her throat. "Adrian," she whispered. No answer, only the soft echo of footsteps approaching from the shadows. Then silence. The storm outside broke, and the lights flickered out. The power was gone. The house had become a black ocean of echoes and unseen movement. Elena stood frozen in the dim light spilling through the window, her reflection faint against the glass. Somewhere below, a door had slammed, soft, deliberate, not the wind. Someone was inside. "Adrian," she whispered again, her voice trembling in the darkness. Silence. She took a hesitant step backward, her foot brushing the corner of the easel. The painting wobbled slightly. A flake of dried paint fell to the floor. The smell of oil and turpentine clung to the air, sharp and nostalgic like the gallery she once worked in. The life she used to know before the contract swallowed it whole. Her eyes darted to the doorway. A shadow flickered across the hall, quick and fleeting. She couldn't tell if it was real or imagined. Her heart pounded in her chest, a frantic drumbeat against the silence. "Elena." The voice came from the dark corridor. Measured, familiar. She turned toward it and saw him. Adrian Vale stood at the edge of the doorway, his face half lit by the faint glow of lightning beyond the window. His expression was unreadable, his clothes damp from the rain, his hair uncharacteristically disheveled. "You shouldn't be here," he said again, but his tone had changed. It wasn't anger this time, it was fear. "You painted me," she said softly, gesturing to the canvas. "You've been watching me. Why?" He didn't answer right away. He stepped into the room, his gaze darting toward the open windows as if checking for something or someone. "Because I had to," he said finally. "Because I needed to remember what it was like to feel something real." Lightning flashed, illuminating his face for a heartbeat. There was pain there, raw human pain. Before she could speak, a crash echoed from the hallway below. Glass shattered. Adrian's head snapped toward the sound. "Stay here," he ordered. Adrian waited, but he was already gone, his footsteps fading down the staircase. She hesitated, torn between fear and the gnawing pull of curiosity. Then she followed, careful not to make a sound. The grand staircase creaked under her bare feet as she descended, each step echoing through the cavernous hall. The lights flickered once, twice, then steadied into a dim, amber glow. The generator had kicked in. Shadows stretched across the marble floors like dark water. The source of the noise was the conservatory room she'd never entered before. Its glass walls looked out over the frozen garden, and now one of them was shattered, the cold wind howling through. Adrian was standing near the broken pane, holding a small metallic object, a drone. Its body was cracked, the propellers bent. He saw her before she could hide, his jaw tightened. "I told you to stay upstairs." "What is that?" "Surveillance," he said flatly. "Someone's been watching the estate, watching us." He didn't answer, which told her everything she needed to know. A flash of lightning revealed something in the snow outside tracks, footprints, leading into the forest beyond the property. Without thinking, she stepped closer to the window, her breath fogging the glass. "Who would want to spy on you?" "Anyone I've ever done business with," he said quietly. "Or anyone I've ever hurt." The way he said it sent a chill through her. He turned away, running a hand through his hair. "Go back upstairs, Alina. Lock your door. I'll handle this." But when he spoke this time, there was no steel in his voice, only exhaustion. She wanted to argue, to demand the truth, but something in his expression, something fragile, like a wound barely healed, stopped her. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat by the window, staring out at the storm. The forest loomed like a black sea, endless and silent. Somewhere out there, someone had been watching. In the morning, the snow had buried the footprints. The house looked the same, but the air felt different, tense, alert. Adrian was gone again before dawn, leaving behind a single note on the kitchen counter. "Don't leave the property." She read it twice, her fingers brushing over the ink. His handwriting was neat, deliberate, like every other part of his life, and yet the note felt protective, almost pleading. Hours passed. The mansion seemed to hold its breath. By evening, she couldn't take it anymore. She wrapped a coat around herself and stepped outside. The snow crunched beneath her boots, the air biting at her skin. The garden was silent except for the wind moving through the bare trees. She followed the path toward the forest's edge, where the fence marked the boundary of the estate. Something glinted in the snow, a piece of metal. She crouched down. It was another drone, smaller than the first. Its lens was cracked but still faintly glowing. When she picked it up, the screen flickered. A video feed, her standing in her room 2 nights ago, painting by the window. She dropped it, her breath catching. Soft click sounded behind her. "Found what you were looking for." She spun around. A woman stood by the fence. Tall, elegant, wrapped in a dark coat. Her eyes were sharp, her smile colder than the snow. "Who are you?" Alina demanded. The woman tilted her head. "You must be the new Mrs. Vale." The words landed like a knife. "I'm nobody," Alina said quickly. "And you're trespassing." The woman stepped closer, the crunch of snow deliberate. "He didn't tell you, did he? About what happened in this house? About who you replaced?" Alina's heart raced. "You mean Clara?" A flash of something unreadable crossed the woman's face. "So you have heard the name. Who are you?" Alina asked again. The woman smiled faintly. "Someone who knows how this ends." Before Alina could move, the stranger turned and disappeared into the trees. When Adrian returned that night, she confronted him the moment he stepped inside. "There was a woman here," she said, voice trembling. "She knew about Clara. She said I replaced her." His face went pale. "What did she look like?" Alina described her. Adrian's hand went to his temple, as if warding off a headache. "Her name's Mara," he said finally. "She used to work for Clara, before she died." "Why was she spying on us?" "She's unstable," he said quickly. "She blames me for what happened. She wants to destroy what's left of my reputation." But his eyes betrayed him. There was more he wasn't saying. He looked at her for a long time, then exhaled slowly. "Clara didn't die in an accident. She took her own life. In this house," he turned away, his shoulders tense, "because I made her feel like a contract instead of a wife. I treated love like a transaction. When she needed me most, I wasn't there." "Is that why you married me?" Alina whispered. "To fix your guilt." Tears stung her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "You can't atone for someone else's death by owning another person, Adrian." That night, she packed a small bag. She didn't know where she was going, only that she couldn't stay. But when she reached the main gate, it was locked. Heavy chains wound around the iron bars. She tried calling for the driver, no answer. The house loomed behind her, the windows dark, the trees whispering secrets she couldn't hear. Then she saw movement at the edge of the woods. A figure watching. She turned back toward the house and froze. Adrian was standing at the top of the stairs, a flashlight in his hand. "Why not?" Her stomach turned to ice. "What are you talking about?" He stepped forward, holding up a piece of paper, one of the unmarked letters. This one was different. A photograph was attached to it. A photo of her sleeping in her bed. The note beneath it read, "You took what wasn't yours." The realization hit her like thunder. "This isn't about you at all," she whispered. "It's about Clara." Lightning flashed again, illuminating the forest beyond. For a split second, she saw Mara's face watching from the trees, her eyes glinting like knives. They searched the grounds together until dawn, finding nothing but disturbed snow and silence. By morning, Adrian was pacing his study, his calm unraveling at the edges. Alina sat on the couch, exhausted, her fingers clutching the edge of her coat. Why would she come after me? She looked at him then, really looked at the man behind the empire, the guilt, the control. And for the first time, she didn't see the monster she'd imagined. She saw a man terrified of losing something fragile he didn't know how to keep. He sank into the chair across from her, his eyes heavy. "Elena, whatever happens, you need to trust me," she hesitated. "Trust isn't something you can demand, Adrian, it's something you earn." Outside, the storm had quieted. The first light of morning spilled through the frost-covered windows. For a brief moment, everything felt calm. Then a sound broke the silence, a soft hum from the study's intercom. Adrian frowned and pressed the button. The sound crackled, then cut out. The room fell silent, but outside the house, the wind began to rise again, howling through the trees like a memory that refused to die. And somewhere deep within the mansion's walls, a light flickered on in the east wing, the wing where Clara had taken her last breath. Adrian whispered almost to himself, "She's not gone." The light in the east wing pulsed like a heartbeat, faint and rhythmic, cutting through the fog of early dawn. The mansion, once silent, now felt alive, breathing, whispering, remembering. Elena followed the glow down the corridor, her steps soft on the marble. Adrian trailed behind, flashlight in hand, his face pale in the shifting shadows. Neither spoke. Words felt fragile here, like sound itself might wake something better left asleep. When they reached the end of the hall, the door that had always been locked stood open. The faint hum of electricity spilled into the air, mingling with the smell of dust and metal. Inside the room was nothing like she'd imagined. Not a bedroom, not a studio, but a surveillance hub. The screens lined the walls, flickering with static. Dozens of camera feeds displayed every corner of the estate, the hallways, the gardens, even her own room. Elena froze. "You were watching me." Adrian's eyes widened as if he, too, was seeing it for the first time. "No, I didn't. This isn't." He stepped forward, scanning the monitors. Some were labeled in small white text. East Wing Primary, Guest Room, Subject ER, Conservatory, Active. The last one made her skin crawl. "Who set this up?" she whispered. Adrian shook his head slowly. "Clara used this room for security. After she died, I sealed it. No one was supposed to have access." Lightning flashed outside, briefly illuminating the walls. That's when Elena saw its scratches along the plaster near the floor, faint but deliberate. She knelt, brushing the dust aside. Letters carved into the wall. "Help me." The words looked desperate, uneven, as if someone had scratched them in with shaking hands. Her throat tightened. "Adrian, these weren't here before." He crouched beside her, eyes tracing the jagged letters. His hand trembled slightly. This was Clara's handwriting. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. A low hum filled the air again, softer this time, almost like a voice under static. One of the monitors flickered, and suddenly, one of the feeds came alive, a video file labeled C23, Final Recording. Before Adrian could stop her, Elena clicked it. The screen filled with the image of Claravale. Her face was pale but beautiful, framed by dark hair. Her eyes looked straight into the camera, calm but tired, as if she'd already accepted something inevitable. "If you're watching this," her voice said, low and clear, "then you've already found the truth. This house is not what it seems, and neither is he." Adrian's face went still. Clara's voice continued. "He thinks he can control the world by owning it. He built walls to keep his pain out, but the walls became his prison. And now, he's built one around you too." Elena felt her chest tighten. She looked at Adrian, but his expression had gone blank, unreadable. On screen, Clara leaned closer to the camera, her voice softened. "He won't tell you what happened that night. He can't, because it wasn't me who wanted to die." The screen went black. The silence that followed felt deafening. Adrian took a step back, his breathing uneven. "That's not real," he said quietly. "It's been doctored, manipulated. Mara must have done this," but Elena heard the fracture in his voice. Doubt. She stood there, staring at the blank screen, her pulse racing. "Adrian, what really happened?" He turned away, running a hand over his face. "I told you the truth." "No," she said softly. "You told me your version of it." For a moment she thought he'd walk away. Instead he faced her again, his eyes cold but glimmering with something raw. "You want the truth? Fine." He gestured toward the darkened screens. "Clara was brilliant, but she was fragile. She hated the world I built. Said it turned people into possessions. Said I turned her into one. And maybe she was right. She wanted to leave. I didn't let her. I told myself it was to protect her, but I think part of me just couldn't stand losing control." He paused, swallowing hard. "The night she died, we argued. She said she was leaving. She ran to this room. I followed, and she locked the door. When I broke it open, his voice cracked. She was gone. Gone." The word hung heavy, colder than the air around them. Elena's gaze drifted to the "help me" carved in the wall. The phrase seemed to pulse under the faint light, almost alive. "You said she took her own life," Elena whispered. "But what if she didn't?" Adrian's eyes met hers, sharp, haunted. "Don't do this. Someone reopened this room. Someone wants us to see these things. Why now? Why me?" He looked away. "Maybe because you're the only one who sees through me." A faint buzz interrupted them, a notification sound from one of the monitors. A new feed appeared, labeled Guest Room Live. It was her room. But the image showed her standing by the window, now wearing the same clothes, moving in real time. Elena's breath caught. She turned instinctively toward the doorway, but it was empty. She looked back at the screen. The image of her was still there, staring at the camera. Then, slowly, the figure in the feed smiled. It wasn't her. The smile was wrong, too slow to knowing. Adrian reached for the control panel and killed the power. The screens went dark all at once. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Adrian said, "Pack a bag. We're leaving the house." She didn't argue. The mansion, once majestic, now felt like a trap. Every room, every shadow seemed to watch them. They made it to the garage before dawn. The snow outside had stopped falling, but a heavy fog blanketed the forest. As Adrian opened the car door, something caught Elena's eye, a single rose placed on the hood, fresh crimson, its petals wet from dew. Attached to it was a note, "She never left, neither will you." Adrian's face hardened. He ripped the note in half and tossed it aside. "Get in." They drove 4 hours through the fog, the city lights distant and pale. Elena stared out the window, the world blurring past. For the first time since signing that contract, she wondered if she'd ever really been free. When they reached the edge of the city, Adrian pulled into an underground parking lot beneath one of his corporate towers. The air smelled of concrete and oil. He killed the engine and sat in silence. "Someone's trying to recreate what happened. To make me relive it, or to make me live it," Elena said quietly. He looked at her, and for a brief second, she saw the man behind the arm of the boy who'd grown up believing love had to be earned through control. "Elena," he said softly, "if you ever feel unsafe around me, if you ever doubt me, you should leave." She studied his face. The sincerity there frightened her more than his distance ever had. "I don't want to run," she said. "Not until I know what I'm running from." That night, they stayed in one of Adrian's penthouse suites, sterile, immaculate, and yet filled with the faintest smell of her perfume. He'd brought her things from the estate, the small traces of her life boxed neatly as if to prove she existed somewhere other than that house. She lay awake long after he fell asleep, the sound of rain against the windows replacing the silence of the mansion. Her mind raced back to the recording, Clara's eyes staring into the lens like she could see beyond time itself. He won't tell you what happened that night. The next morning, she woke to find Adrian gone again. On the glass coffee table, a tablet sat unlocked, displaying a document titled Acquisition Ledger -2018. The list was long, names and properties most crossed out. But one entry stood out, Clara Vale Foundation dissolved. She scrolled further. At the bottom of the list, dated only a month ago, Elena Ruiz contractual marriage agreement. Her chest tightened. To him she'd been another entry, a replacement. But below her name, a new note had been added in his handwriting. Amendment filed, to be voided upon her consent. He'd planned to release her. The realization hit her like a cold wind somewhere between guilt and confusion. He wasn't keeping her anymore. He was trying to let her go, and that terrified her more than the mansion ever did. Before she could process it, the tablet flickered. A message appeared across the screen. "You can't free her if you never freed me." She dropped it. The words vanished as suddenly as they'd come. When she looked up, her reflection in the window wasn't alone. For a heartbeat, she swore she saw Clara standing behind her, pale still, watching. The glass fogged with her breath, forming words that faded as quickly as they appeared. "Find the truth beneath the ashes." Elena turned, heart pounding, but the room was empty. She knew what she had to do. By evening, she was back in the car, driving toward the Vale estate. The fog had lifted, revealing the long winding road she'd once taken under contract. Now, she took it by choice. When the mansion came into view, it was eerily quiet. No staff, no lights, just the echo of wind through the broken conservatory glass. Inside, everything was as they'd left it except the east wing. The door was open again, the hum louder now, almost rhythmic. She stepped inside, flashlight trembling in her hand. The walls were covered in soot, the smell of burned wood thick in the air. She followed it to the far corner where the word "Help Me" had been carved. Beneath it, the plaster had crumbled away, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside lay a stack of photographs burned at the edges, Adrian and Clara, their wedding, the estate, the surveillance room. And at the bottom, a single image that made her breath hitch, Clara standing with another man, smiling. On the back of the photo, scrawled in fading ink, "He wasn't the one who locked the door." Thunder rumbled overhead, shaking the glass panes. Elena stared at the photograph, realization dawning like a shadow creeping in reverse. Clara hadn't been trapped by Adrian. Someone else had wanted her gone. The air shifted behind her. She turned slowly, flashlight beam cutting through the dark. "Mara," she whispered. The woman stood there, half lit by the broken moonlight, a calm smile curving her lips. "You found it," she said. "Good. Why?" Elena's voice trembled. "Why do all this?" Mara's expression softened into something almost pitying. "Because the truth isn't about who died, Elena. It's about who lived." Before Elena could respond, a sound echoed through the hall, footsteps. Adrian's voice, calling her name. Mara's smile faded. "You need to decide which of us you believe before he gets here." Elena took a step back, gripping the photo. "What do you mean?" Mara tilted her head, her eyes dark and knowing. "Because one of us killed Clara." The flashlight flickered, and in that instant Elena realized she no longer knew who she was afraid of. The air between them was thin-charged, brittle, ready to break. Elena could hear the rain against the glass ceiling above the east wing, every drop sounding heavier than the last. Mara's eyes glinted like wet steel, reflecting both pity and warning. One of us killed Clara. The words hung like fog, refusing to lift. Elena's breath caught. The flashlight trembled in her hand, the beam slicing through dust and memory. Behind her, Adrian's footsteps echoed closer, measured, deliberate, the rhythm of a man trying to control something that could no longer be contained. Mara's voice dropped to a whisper. He'll tell you it was her mind, that she couldn't take the pressure. But I was here, Elena. I saw what really happened. Before Elena could respond, Adrian appeared at the doorway, his expression unreadable. His gaze flicked between them, landing on the photo clutched in Elena's hand. Mara, he said, his tone quiet, almost weary. You shouldn't have come back. Neither should you, she replied, her voice sharp as glass. You never could let the past rot in peace because you buried it alive. The silence that followed was suffocating. Elena stepped back, her mind spinning. Stop, she said, her voice trembling. Both of you. I don't even know what's real anymore. Adrian looked at her, his eyes softening. Elena, she's been manipulating you. She blames me for Clara's death, but she's the one who pushed her over the edge. She was jealous obsessed. Mara laughed bitterly. Is that what you tell yourself? That I was jealous? She came to me the night before she died. She was terrified of you, Adrian. She said you'd changed, that you'd locked her away for trying to leave. Adrian shook his head. She was ill. You exploited her fears. Elena's pulse thundered in her ears. The walls of the mansion seemed to close in, heavy with secrets and ghosts. The carved words on the wall helped me seem to glow faintly under the flashlight's beam, mocking them all. I saw the recording, she said, her voice low. Clara said she didn't want to die. Adrian turned to her, his composure fracturing. That video was edited. I would never hurt her, but you didn't help her either, Mara spat. You just watched her unravel and called it fate. Adrian's jaw tightened. You don't know what it's like to love someone you can't save. Mara took a step closer. And you don't know what it's like to love someone you didn't need to own. Lightning cracked above the roof, the flash flooding the room with white light. For a brief, blinding second, all three faces were illuminated: fear, guilt, defiance, then darkness again. Elena felt the world tilt around her. If one of you is lying, she whispered, then who's telling the truth? Mara turned to her, her tone suddenly soft. Look at the photo, Elena. The man with Clara, he wasn't Adrian. His name was Samuel Duran. He was her lawyer, and her lover. Adrian's head snapped up. That's not possible. It's true, Mara said. She planned to leave you and start over with him, but before she could, she vanished. Elena's mind raced. You think someone killed her? I don't think, Mara said, eyes locked on Adrian. I know. Adrian's hands curled into fists, his composure shattering piece by piece. Enough, he said through clenched teeth. You're twisting everything. She was unstable. She destroyed herself, and you, he stopped, his voice breaking. You're using Elena to destroy me the same way. But Elena wasn't sure anymore. The lines between truth and manipulation had blurred beyond recognition. She turned the photograph over again, tracing the faded ink with her thumb. He wasn't the one who locked the door. Then who was? She asked quietly. No one answered. A gust of wind blew through the broken glass in the conservatory, scattering papers from the open compartment. One of them caught her eye: an incident report, dated the night of Clara's death. The handwriting wasn't Adrian's. It was Mara's. Elena picked it up, scanning the lines. Subject found unresponsive in East Wing cause. Asphyxiation. Witness arrived at 2:17. Witness, she murmured. That was you. Mara's expression faltered. I found her too late. Adrian's voice was barely a whisper. No, you said you weren't there that night. Mara hesitated, her confidence wavering. I heard the noise. I tried to stop her. When I broke the door open, she was already gone. But you wrote witness arrived at 2:17. Elena pressed. The police report said she died around 2. So how did you know the exact minute? Mara's lips parted, but no words came. Adrian stepped forward, his voice cutting through the storm outside. Because she was there before Clara died. Mara's face drained of color. You think I killed her, she whispered. I think you let her die, he said. And now you're trying to rewrite it. Lightning struck again, closer this time, rattling the glass. The storm had reached the estate, tearing through branches, slamming rain against the windows like fists. Elena backed away from both of them, her heartbeat thundering in her chest. Stop it, she shouted. Whatever happened that night, it's over. It has to be. But neither of them moved. Mara's eyes glistened not with anger this time, but grief. You don't understand. Nothing's over until the truth comes out. And the truth is, Adrian doesn't want to find it. Adrian took a slow breath, his voice low. Because I already know it. The air went still. Even the storm seemed to pause, as if waiting. He turned to Elena. The night Clara died, I wasn't the only one home. Mara was there. So was Samuel Duran. I confronted them. I told him to leave my house. He refused. His voice darkened. There was an argument. Clara begged us to stop. Then she ran upstairs. By the time I got to her, the door was locked. When I broke it open, she was gone. Elena's pulse quickened. So Samuel disappeared. Adrian finished. No trace. The police called it a disappearance tied to corporate fraud, but I always knew there was more. Mara's voice cracked. You think I helped him? I think you covered for him, Adrian said. And now he's using you to finish what he started. The words hit like thunder. Mara staggered back, her breath coming fast. You don't know anything, she said, but her voice had lost its certainty. He was going to expose you, Adrian. The foundation, the offshore accounts, the contracts. Clara wanted to free herself and you killed her before she could. The accusation tore through the room like wind through broken glass. Alina looked between them, her mind fracturing under the weight of their truths and lies. She felt like she was drowning, pulled under by both their stories. Stop, she whispered again, weaker this time. Please. Mara turned to her, desperate now. You can't trust him. You've seen what he's capable of. That contractor, I think it was just business. It was ownership, Alina. He's repeating what he did to her. But Adrian's voice came out low, steady. She's right about one thing. I was a man who controlled everything he touched, until you with a confession disarmed her more than anything else. For a moment, the storm's fury faded behind the sound of his voice. You made me remember what it felt like to care without needing to own, he said. That's why I tried to let you go. Alina felt her throat tighten. Then why are we still here? Because you came back. The words hung in the air like smoke. Mara's expression shifted, something dark passing through it. Of course she came back, she said quietly. She's part of it now. Before either of them could respond, the house shuddered. The power flickered, and a deep rumble echoed through the walls. The security system, still running somewhere in the mansion, had come back online. One of the screens in the corner glowed to life again. Another video file began to play automatically. Clara's voice filled the room, trembling this time. If anyone finds this, know that I didn't mean for it to end this way. He found out about Samuel. He said no one leaves the Vale estate without permission. Adrian froze. That's not my voice. But on the recording, a shadow crossed the screen, a figure at the edge of the frame. Male, tall but indistinct. Then another voice, distorted by static, locked the door. Elena's breath hitched. The tone was familiar but not Adrian's. It was deeper. Mara's face turned white. That's Samuel, she whispered. The recording cut out. For a long moment, no one moved. Only the storm spoke, thunder rolling over the mountains like distant drums. Adrian sank into the nearest chair, his face pale, hollow. He's alive. Mara's hand trembled. He shouldn't be. Alina stared at the dead screen, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. If he's alive, she said softly, then what does he want now? Adrian lifted his gaze to hers, the answer already forming in the weight of his silence. Outside, lightning split the sky, bathing the house in white. And in that instant, Alina saw movement through the rain-blurred window, a figure standing at the edge of the forest, motionless, watching. When the light faded, he was gone. The wind howled again, carrying with it a whisper that almost sounded like a voice. You can't bury the truth, Adrian. Alina turned toward him, fear and realization colliding in her chest. He's here. And before either of them could speak, the mansion's front door creaked open somewhere below, slowly, deliberately. The storm swallowed the sound. Then came footsteps. The footsteps echoed through the marble corridor, steady, deliberate, soaked in rain and memory. Alina froze, her pulse hammering against her ribs. Adrian turned toward the staircase, his face pale in the flickering light. Mara backed away, eyes fixed on the entryway like a creature sensing its predator long before seeing it. The front door creaked again, a sound too slow to be accidental. Then came the silence that follows fear, that heavy, loaded kind of quiet that fills a room before it shatters. The air smelled of wet earth and electricity. Somewhere beneath the thunder, a faint ticking could be heard, the sound of the grandfather clock in the foyer, keeping time for ghosts. Then a voice, low, calm, unhurried. Adrian Vale, it said, you always did keep the door open for me. Adrian's shoulders stiffened. For a moment he didn't move. Then he whispered, Samuel. Elena's blood went cold. She could see the silhouette emerging from the darkness beyond the doorway, a tall figure in a rain-soaked coat, the kind of presence that carried its own storm with it. When he stepped into the light, the years had altered him, streaks of gray at his temples, eyes sharpened by something colder than time. You're alive, Adrian said, barely breathing the words. Samuel smiled faintly. You sound disappointed. Mara's hand flew to her mouth. You shouldn't be here, neither should you, Samuel replied. But here we are back in the graveyard of what you both built. Alina couldn't look away. The tension between the three of them vibrated like a live wire, old betrayals surfacing with every breath. Adrian stepped forward. You lied to her. You made her believe I was the monster. Samuel tilted his head, his voice soft but venomous. You didn't need my help to play that part. She came to me broken, Adrian. You gave her the pieces. I just held them. She loved you, Adrian said. And you used her. Samuel's eyes glinted. And you didn't. The thunder answered for them. Mara whispered. He's here for something. Samuel turned to her. I'm here for truth. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small flash drive. Clara's final message, he said. The real one. The one neither of you wanted found. Adrian's face drained of color. That's not possible. Oh, but it is. Samuel stepped closer to the table and placed the drive beside the old photograph. The two objects like relics of a love gone wrong. You thought deleting it would erase her, but she knew better. She hid it in plain sight. Alina looked at the drive, its metallic surface reflecting the flicker of lightning. "Play it," she said. No one moved. Then Mara crossed the room, picked it up with trembling fingers, and connected it to the nearby monitor. The screen buzzed to life, static cutting through the tension. At first, there was only darkness. Then Clara appeared, sitting in the same conservatory, the rain visible behind her, her eyes red but clear. "If you're watching this," she began softly. Then I didn't make it out. Her voice cracked slightly, but she pressed on. "Adrian, I loved you, but love isn't supposed to feel like a cage. You said I'd thank you one day for keeping me safe, but all I wanted was to breathe." Adrian's eyes burned with something between anguish and denial. "That's not," Clara continued. "And Samuel, I thought you'd save me, but you wanted me for your war against him. I became a weapon between you, not a woman." Mara's breath caught. Clara's face softened, looking straight into the camera now. "If anyone ever finds this, please know I wasn't a victim. I was just tired of being rewritten." Then, faintly, just before the feed ended, she whispered, "The truth is never cold, it burns." The screen went black. The silence afterward was unbearable. Samuel's voice broke through it first. "She was going to expose both of us, the Foundation's accounts, the contracts, the manipulation. I didn't stop her." Adrian's hands trembled. "You let her die." "I didn't kill her," Samuel snapped. "She ran from both of us. I came back that night because she called me. She said she'd found something that could destroy everything we'd built." Mara stepped forward. "The ledger." Samuel nodded. "The ledger." Elena's voice barely rose above a whisper. "What ledger?" Adrian turned to her, his expression haunted. The Veil Foundation was never just philanthropy. It was an instrument, a network for buying silence, Clara found out. Samuel's eyes darkened. She found proof. Lightning flared again, and in that flash Alina saw what had been buried in the dust of years. Not just love gone wrong, but empire built on control. Clara hadn't been the first to sign a contract, just the first to break one. Mara spoke quietly. "She hid the ledger somewhere in this house." Adrian stared at her. "You knew." "I suspected," she said. "But you would have buried it if I'd told you." Samuel looked between them. "Then we're all here for the same reason, aren't we?" Alina felt the storm outside bleed into the walls, the house itself humming with secrets too heavy to hold. Somewhere deep inside, she knew that whatever truth waited ahead would not set anyone free, it would consume them instead. They moved together down the hall, into the library where the scent of dust and paper lingered like memory. Mara reached for a candle, its light flickering across the rows of old ledgers and files. "She would have hidden it somewhere poetic," Mara murmured. "Something symbolic." Adrian's gaze drifted upward to the portrait of Clara hanging above the fireplace. Her eyes, painted with eerie precision, seemed to follow them. He crossed the room slowly, reached behind the frame, and pressed against the panel. A soft click echoed. The wall shifted slightly, revealing a narrow compartment. Inside was a black journal. Samuel reached for it, but Alina stopped him. "Let him open it," she said, her voice steady. Adrian's fingers brushed the cover. The air seemed to tighten around them. He opened it. The pages were filled with Clara's handwriting, meticulous, beautiful, damning. Dates, signatures, transaction codes, names. So many names. She documented everything, Adrian whispered. "Every contract, every threat." Samuel leaned closer. "She was going to expose you." Adrian's gaze lifted. "Expose us. You funded the first accounts. Samuel, you made the network possible." Samuel froze. Mara's voice trembled. "Then she wasn't running from one of you. She was running from both." The storm roared, wind howling through the broken windows like a voice from the grave. Alina took a step back, her chest tight. The truth was no longer cold, it was fire, devouring everything it touched. Adrian turned toward her, his face shadowed by remorse. "Now you know what this house is built on. Why I wanted to destroy it before anyone could dig deeper." "You wanted to protect yourself," Samuel said. "I wanted to end it." For a long charged moment, the three of them stood in the flickering light, the weight of the past pressing down like gravity. Then Mara spoke, her tone soft but decisive. "We can't hide this anymore." Adrian looked at her. "If it goes public, it ruins hundreds of people. Their careers, their families. Then maybe that's justice," she said. He stared at her, the war in his eyes silent but brutal. Then he closed the journal and handed it to Alina. "You decide." The storm outside reached its peak. Thunder rolled through the mountains like cannon fire. Alina looked at the journal, the final piece of Clara's truth, and felt every heartbeat like a countdown. "Why me?" she asked. Adrian's voice was quiet. "Because you still believe love can survive truth." She wanted to answer, but the words caught in her throat. The house shuddered again, this time from something more than the storm. The sound of breaking glass echoed through the hallway. Samuel turned sharply. "Someone else is here." They ran toward the sound. In the conservatory, the door that had once been locked shut stood open now, wind tearing through the vines. The rain had poured across the marble floor, washing away dust and time. And in the center of it all, on the floor beneath the cracked glass ceiling, lay a single object, Clara's locket. Alina bent down, lifting it carefully. Inside was a photograph, not of Adrian, not of Samuel, but of all three of them, and behind it a folded note. She opened it. The ink had faded, but the words were still legible. When you find this, remember, love was never the crime, silence was. The thunder softened, rolling into distance. The storm at last was breaking. Adrian sank to his knees beside her, eyes wet. Mara stood behind him, her expression unreadable, somewhere between sorrow and relief. Samuel looked away, the weight of years collapsing in his shoulders. Alina closed the locket, her fingers trembling. She didn't die hating you, she said quietly. She died trying to save you. No one spoke. The only sound was the rain easing against the glass, the rhythm slowing like the heartbeat of the house itself. Adrian rose slowly, his voice barely audible. Then maybe it's time we save her too. He looked at the journal in Elena's hands, then toward the horizon beyond the storm. The truth goes out tonight, she said. He nodded once, and as the first streaks of dawn began to pierce the fading clouds, the mansion stood still, not haunted anymore, but hollowed out, emptied of its lies. The storm had taken everything but the truth, and in its place, something fragile began to grow. Not forgiveness, not love reborn, but peace. Quiet, imperfect, and finally real. The camera would linger there on the locket in Elena's palm, the journal open beside her, and the faintest reflection of Clara's smile in the glass as the rain stopped, and the world exhaled, almost silence. Then a final whisper, as if carried on the wind. You can't bury the truth. And the screen fades to black. The rain stopped before dawn, leaving behind a silence so complete that it seemed to hum. The mansion stood like a monument to what had been, windows cracked, doors half open, its walls finally unburdened of their secrets. The air smelled of wet wood and new beginnings, though no one inside quite knew what that meant yet. Alina sat by the window, the gray light spilling over her face. The journal rested on the table beside her, its pages still damp at the edges. The locket lay next to it, open to the faded photograph, three faces smiling, unaware of the storm waiting beyond that captured moment in time. She traced Clara's handwriting on the note once more. Love was never the crime. Silence was. Those words felt heavier now, but also lighter somehow, like something that had finally landed after years of falling. She closed the locket gently, as if to protect what little innocence remained in it. Adrian stood across the room, staring at the fireplace that had long gone cold. Mara was by the doorway, the faint dawn making her silhouette soft, almost fragile. Samuel had left before sunrise. He hadn't said where he was going, only that he needed to face what came next on his own. Maybe to turn himself in, maybe to disappear again. No one had asked him to explain. The silence between them had been enough. Alina looked at Adrian, noticing the way his hands trembled slightly when he tried to speak. He had always been composed, every gesture calculated, but now the veneer was gone, and what remained was something raw. When I built this house, he said, voice quiet, I wanted it to be unshakable, a place no one could break into or out of. He glanced at the shattered windows, the water stains spreading like veins across the floor. I guess the storm had other ideas. Mara stepped closer, her tone measured but softer than before. You built it out of fear. We all did. Clara was the only one brave enough to walk out. She never made it out, he said. She did, Alina murmured. Just not the way any of us expected. For a while, no one spoke. The only sound came from the slow dripping of water from the ceiling, each drop marking the time between what had been and what was left. The morning light grew stronger, painting long golden lines across the dusty air. Alina stood and crossed to the piano near the window, untouched for years, its surface dulled by neglect. She pressed one of the keys. It gave a low, uncertain note. The sound lingered, soft and trembling, like a memory rediscovered. She used to play, Adrian said, his eyes distant. Always this time of morning. Said it made the house feel alive. Alina pressed another key, and another, until a melody began to form, hesitant at first, then fuller. Something between sadness and release. Mara leaned against the wall, her eyes closing for a brief moment. When she opened them again, they glistened in the light. She deserved this, Mara said quietly. To be remembered without all the noise. Adrian nodded slowly. She will be outside. The first rays of sunlight broke over the ridge, slicing through the lingering mist. The mountains, so long shrouded by storm, emerged once more, their edges sharp and golden. Elena's gaze followed the light until it touched the old gate at the edge of the property. It looked different now, less like a boundary, more like an opening. I sent the files, she said. Adrian turned. You did. To the press, the foundation, the contracts, all of it. Her voice was steady. No one should carry what she died trying to reveal. Mara inhaled slowly, nodding. Then it's done. Adrian's expression tightened for a moment. Grief, resignation, something in between. Then he nodded to it should have been done long ago. He walked toward the window, looking out at the clearing horizon. The sky was beginning to clear, the clouds pulling apart in streaks of silver and blue. Do you think, he asked, still facing away, there's a way to begin again after all this? Alina hesitated. Maybe, she said, but not by erasing what happened, only by learning how to live with it. He turned toward her, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw no trace of the man who once controlled everything around him, just someone tired of pretending that control was strength. She saw that in you, he said softly, the hope I'd forgotten. The sunlight reached them fully now, stretching across the floor, warming the cold edges of the room. Outside, the world was quiet, no thunder, no wind, only the distant call of morning birds. Mara moved to the staircase, picking up her coat from the banister. I'm leaving too, she said. There's a world out there that doesn't need our ghosts haunting it. Alina looked up. Where will you go? Anywhere the sky feels honest. She smiled faintly at her own answer, and for a brief second she looked young again, not burdened by secrets or survival, just human. She turned to Adrian. You should come down from your mountains, Adrian. Sometimes the only way to build again is on new ground. He gave a faint nod. Maybe one day. When she walked out, her footsteps were lighter than they had been in years. The door closed behind her with a sound that didn't echo, it settled. Final, Elena remained by the window, watching as the last traces of storm water shimmered along the path. She thought of Clara, of her laughter caught between two impossible loves, of her strength mistaken for fragility, and she thought of the line that had haunted her since she first read it, in that forgotten letter. The truth is never cold, it burns. Now she understood what Clara meant. The truth wasn't meant to destroy them, it was meant to purify. Fire doesn't ask what deserves to be saved, it simply reveals what cannot burn. Adrian joined her by the window. What will you do now? He asked. I'll go back to the city, she said. There's work to do, stories to tell. He smiled faintly. About us. About truth, she replied. And what it costs. They stood in silence again, watching as sunlight turned the rain-soaked grounds into mirrors. The reflection of the house rippled in the puddles, distorted but still recognizable, like memory itself. Adrian spoke softly. She said once that love isn't about staying. It's about leaving something behind that still breathes when you're gone. Alina nodded. Then maybe she never really left. Outside, a single bird landed on the broken gatepost, shaking water from its wings. The gesture was simple, but it felt profound, as if nature itself was rewriting the house's final chapter. Alina closed the journal one last time and handed it to Adrian. You should keep this. He looked down at it, then back at her. No, it belongs to her story now, not mine. She hesitated, then placed it gently on the windowsill where the light caught its cover. When she turned to go, Adrian didn't stop her. He only said, "Thank you for finishing what she started." Alina paused at the doorway. "We didn't finish it," she said softly. "We just made sure it wouldn't stay buried." And then she walked out, into the cool morning air. The estate seemed smaller from the outside, less imposing, more human. The mist rose from the fields like breath, returning to something long thought lifeless. As she walked down the path, the sound of her footsteps blended with the rustle of leaves and the quiet hum of the waking world. Behind her, the house caught the light of the rising sun. The broken windows sparkled, refracting the light like pieces of truth finally scattered to the wind. At the edge of the property, she stopped and looked back one last time. The locket still rested in her palm. She opened it again. Clara's face smiled faintly beneath the worn glass. For a moment, Alina imagined she could hear her voice carried faintly through the breeze, that familiar whisper that had once haunted the halls. "You can't bury the truth." She smiled, not with sadness, but with understanding, and placed the locket on the old gatepost. The sunlight touched it, warming the metal until it glowed softly. Then she turned and began to walk down the hill, toward the road, toward the world waiting beyond the mist. The camera would stay on the locket for a while, the wind brushing over it, the reflection of the sky moving across its surface. Then the frame would shift upward past the trees, past the lingering clouds, to the open horizon where the first light of morning spread without restraint. A voice Elena's would rise softly over the final image, almost as a thought. Maybe the truth doesn't set us free. Maybe it just reminds us who we were before we learned to hide. The light grows brighter. And maybe that's enough. The screen fades to white, not darkness, but morning. And the story ends, quietly, like a long breath finally released.